Alright, this will be our final lesson for the unit on China. So, we've gone through a bunch of dynasties so far. Started with the Zhao dynasty, then to the Zhou dynasty, spent a while on that one. We went to the Qin dynasty, or God, I just forgot the Shang. We went from the Zhao dynasty to the Shang dynasty to the Zhou dynasty to the Qin dynasty. I've given you basics on each. But the dynasties we're really covering most were the Zhou dynasty. We hit that pretty hard, especially with the philosophies. And went to the Qin dynasty. I went into that fairly in depth, not just with like how they use the legalism, but that character Qin Shi Huangdi and how he is a huge character, not just for the history of China, but for, well, all of history. But now we're going to be moving into the Han dynasty, and there's a bit of a switch here. So when I say a bit of a switch, the Qin dynasty doesn't last long. And the reason why the Qin dynasty doesn't last long is it sucked to live in it, pretty much. It just, legalism, like hardcore legalist state, where pretty much you have no freedom at all. You know, we call that a bit of a totalitarian system, that very strict legalist type of state. It wasn't fun. So when Qin Shi Huangdi, though, kind of ruled with, not kind of, definitely ruled with an iron fist. When he dies, I don't know if I explained this last time. In fact, I'm not remembering this at all. But if I didn't explain this, I'm sorry. I'm sorry either way. Sorry if I've explained this, or sorry if I didn't explain this earlier. But he really wanted to live forever. And he is one of the guys that actually sends out a bunch of people on quests to go find the elixir of immortality. Then he sets kind of his magicians, his magic men, his alchemists, basically, to trying to come up with elixirs or things that elongate life so he can live long enough so his questers can go and adventurers can find the elixir of immortality and bring it back to him. The funny thing is, one of his alchemists realized that, hey, mercury, I bet you if you melt this down, or when I melt this down, it looks pretty cool. I bet you this prolongs life. So he gave Qin Shi Huangdi straight liquid mercury. That doesn't look, just so you guys know, that's incredibly poisonous to your body. And to ingest it in the amounts that it seems like Qin Shi Huangdi did, well, his quest for immortality literally brought him to his death. He died much earlier than he probably would have. Not probably, definitely would have. So, but his death leaves a major power vacuum. Like I said earlier, he ruled with an iron fist. No one could stand up to him. It definitely seemed like he had the mandate of heaven just because the way things went. Life sucked under it, but just the heavens must want it that way. But when he dies, his son was such I don't know how to explain this, a weakling. He's viewed as a bit like a spoiled brat now. What was he? Not sure. That's the way the records kind of portray him. But the only reason why you can even call the Qin dynasty a dynasty is because, yes, the son did take over for a little bit, but it was pretty much seen that he was not his father. He was not going to rule the way his father did. And a lot of aspiring generals from the Qin dynasty saw the opportunity to say, hey, I think I have the mandate of heaven. And so thus starts a whole new civil war. And it looks like things might go back into a massive warring states period. No, fortunately it wasn't like 50 some odd warring states in the beginning, 52 or whatever it was. You have I can't remember how many generals, 5, 6, 7, 8, something like that, generals that have their own portion of the army that's loyal to them. And they start going at it. So you start seeing that warring states period come up where, yes, your safety that Qin Shi Huangdi did put in place, you might not have been very happy with it, but your safety has now been thrown out of whack. So not only are you unhappy on the way just life is, because you really have no control of your life, your safety is now thrown out as well. And remember what we've said before, those are the two major things you need to have. Some sort of sense of control, but definitely the most important part is a sense of safety and security in order to be happy. So everybody's just pissed off. In comes this guy named Gao Tzu, who later on becomes Liu Bang. There's a story about this guy I like to tell because it's just a fun story. I like to kind of equate this guy as kind of like the Chinese Robin Hood story. Not exactly the same, but it has the same type of feel. So, simply put, these Qin dynasty generals who have now deposed the current emperor, the son of Qin Shi Huangdi, are all vying for power, and they're just warring amongst themselves big time. And there's a couple at the top where it seems like one of those 3 or 4 will definitely win out, or 2 or 3, however many it was. But in the process, of course, they're going from valley to valley, from village to village, picking up conscripts. You will fight for us. You don't have a choice. And, we'll take all your food as well. Like, that stuff is happening again. So basically, a very charismatic peasant named Gao Tzu, who I can't remember where he lived necessarily. He lived in a certain valley in China. He's like, this sucks. And he comes up with an idea. By the way, he is not literate or anything like that, as far as I understand. Like, he's just this charismatic guy. He's that type of guy. Everybody likes him, looks to him as kind of a village leader type thing. And he's seeing just this idea that towns and villages are getting ravaged. Like, not ours. Our town will not get jacked. And how are we going to make sure we don't get jacked? Well, I'm going to go talk to the other village leaders around the valley, and we're going to make a coalition. Essentially with this idea that, we would rather die defending our village than have to go die on some unknown battlefield for people we don't even like. So we're going to see if this strategy works. We're going to put a coalition together, get an army together, thousands of us, maybe even tens of thousands. And when those generals come around figuring that they're going to force us to fight for them, we're going to fight them instead. And the idea is, we might all die, but maybe they'll realize, hey, maybe we should go to the next valley over to get those men over there because they're not going to fight us. So why would we fight them when, why would we fight these peasants when we lose soldiers doing so? We'll waste valuable time and resources just to get a couple more when we can go to a different valley and just pick up guys for no cost at all, you could say. And it works. This strategy works. Gao Tzu, of course, becomes a hero amongst his valley. He saved them from these rampaging armies. Of course, the generals are like, well, I'll come back and get you later. Once I become emperor, we'll put you down pretty good. The thing is that the other valleys around and other villages around started getting the idea like, wait a minute, Gao Tzu's onto something here. So let's join him. So his coalition doesn't just stay that little valley he has. It goes into like the whole region until all the people are getting together under his leadership. To essentially form a massive peasant army. And now he's getting in, so the records say, again, this might be a bit overblown, but in the hundreds of thousands of men at his command. So, one of the generals takes notice of this. They've been noticing, but he's like, okay, something has to be done. This guy needs to be put down just once for all. We can't have this peasant claimant to the throne. So he at this point, this one general is seen as the guy he is definitely the one that is most likely going to win out. They've knocked out a bunch of the other generals. There's only like a few left in the mix, so he thinks it's no big deal to come and just crush this peasant rebellion. So he comes in, and lo and behold, he gets beat. And it is a rout. It wasn't just a hard battle, although it was, but he gets soundly beaten. And when Gao Tzu beats this general, this top general, everyone in China is just like, okay, he has the mandate of heaven. That is definitely a sign this illiterate peasant that came out of nowhere, who beats essentially the strongest general of the land, that means he has the mandate of heaven. And pretty much everybody just, okay, you're it. You're now the emperor. And so this peasant, Gao Tzu, renames himself Liu Bang. I think I'm saying that right. Liu Bang. Anyways. And he becomes the first emperor of the Han Dynasty, the Han family. Now, he is a huge fan of Confucianism. He loves this idea that, people are born good. But he adds a little bit more to this, saying, you know what? I shouldn't say adds more to it. He emphasizes it more. And especially the ruler to subject thing is like, if I am your ruler, then I need to be the best ruler I can be, even if I have to recognize that I am not perfect in all ways. And he completely redefines the role of the emperor for pretty much the next 2,000 years of Chinese history. That basically a good emperor is someone who doesn't do everything himself and has an iron fist control over everything like Qin Shi Huangdi was. But the emperor is someone who, yes, has full control, makes decisions in the end, but will always look at his subordinates for help, and it will acknowledge when they made mistakes and things like this. And when he becomes this type of emperor, I mean, the people absolutely love this. And this is something that we, from our mentality, like from an American mentality, we look back at a guy like Liu Bang here, or Emperor Liu Bang, and saying that you are cool. We like you. This is the type of leader we would like in our society as well. In our constitutional democratic republic, these are the types of guys we would like in place as well. The thing is that even though even though he seems to be this awesome emperor, this guy, like this perfect Confucian emperor that will just make China this great place again, well, it doesn't necessarily go so well for him. And this is where I'm going with this. Now, right here it says that he instituted a government that leaned on Confucian values but still had a legalist base. Now, I just told you he was all about Confucianism, so why would he lean on legalism? Well, I won't bring that up yet. Something bad goes on. Just because you're a good leader, just because you're doing what's best for the country type thing, doesn't mean that people are going to like you. There's always going to be those power mongers out there that will try to undercut you and get what they can just because they can, because power is addictive. And in this case, it was his own family. So he had cousins, uncles. I don't know if it was one of his siblings, maybe a brother. I can't remember. I have to read up on this again. But a lot of his family members, along with a lot of other people within the government that were given positions of power, people that were in his peasant army, and then other people that said that they would basically be faithful to him, and he was willing to be merciful with them. Governors from the past Qin dynasty, that is. He gave them positions of power. He was like, yes, you seem like a qualified person. I'm willing to trust you. What a Confucian would do. I'm willing to trust you. Here, you're governor of this area. You're a general of this area. You'll be over this part of the government and things like that. A lot of them, I shouldn't say a lot of them. Whenever I say a lot, it always makes it sound like most of them. Not most of them. It's a few of them, but it was a lot of people in total, and especially a bunch of his family members. They form a coalition against him, kind of like a secret combination against Emperor Gaozu, and they try to kill him. And this whole idea is they're going to kill him so they can get more power to themselves somehow. Like how that was going to work, not really sure, but somehow they viewed him as a roadblock to what they wanted in life. So the assassination plot was foiled at the very last minute, and it shook Gaozu. I keep calling him, again, Gaozu, Liu Bang, same guy. It shook Liu Bang to his core. If I can't trust my family members, who can I trust? And he gets a little bit vengeful at this point, understandably so. But he's like, all right, I like Confucianism, but I think Qin Shi Huangdi actually had a little bit. He understood a little bit. We do need to have some legalist things in here, like some punishments in place. A spy system would probably be a good idea, just to make sure this type of thing doesn't happen again. I can't even trust my own family in positions of power. So he basically does put more of a law code in place than he had so beforehand, because this whole thing went down. And then he also comes up with what's called the exam system, or the examination system. And by the way, you guys are fairly familiar with the term exam. And yes, you can blame the Chinese for taking standardized tests. The quiz on China that you're going to be taking next week or the week after, you can blame on China. So, ACT, SAT, all tests pretty much can blame on China. But here are the reasons why tests are actually a good thing to have in society, as much as we like to complain about them. To just put it simply off, they're one of the best mechanisms that any society can have or has used for the past 2,000 years to try to make things fair. It doesn't mean it works all the time, because if we get into this, we could talk about how testing is unfair in so many situations and individuals are different and should be tested differently and blah, 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 blah. I'm not going to go down that road right now. But in the grand scope of things, when you're not looking at the individual, that's not a very American thing to say, by the way, when you're not looking at the individual, kind of taking this one thing that fits all, this one-size-fits-all approach, did seem like a good thing to go with at the time. Has seemed like the things to go at the time, and even today in many cases. Say, all right, how are we going to get the best person in place? How are we going to get the best person in there? Because originally, Liu Bang, he put a bunch of his family members and people he trusted, he thought he could trust, into positions of power. They weren't necessarily qualified. It's not like they had the training to be a governor in many cases. But he did so out of what's called nepotism. Now, if you notice that, there's the word nepotism there. If you've never heard that term before, it means that you favor someone or you give something to somebody not because they merited it. Remember our social class system, meritocracy, not because they earned it, but because you like them or you love them or you want to see that one person do better. Now, if that person does merit it, then great. If this is not making sense to you, then here's some great examples I know pretty much everybody in this class can understand. Little League, whatever, like soccer, football, cheerleading, whatever you can think of, dance classes. It doesn't matter. Especially in the Little League, you always have like the parents be the coaches. And a lot of times, a parent will be a coach over a team where their own kid is on the team. So, and everybody kind of sees this. Some people see into this more than it really is. I've seen that before. I'm going on tangents too much. Basically, a lot of times, I imagine everybody who's been on a team where the coach's kid got more playing time or more dance time than everybody else. And the only reason why he or she got that playing time is because coach is your dad or your mom. That is what's called nepotism. Now, I've been in situations like that. I remember being on a baseball team a Little League baseball team where the coach's kid got a lot of playing time and he wasn't that good. I wasn't that great either, but we had a lot of other kids that were a little bit more talented. So, but his dad was the coach. It wasn't really bad, but you could tell, coach wasn't going to bench his own son for forever type thing. It should be forever, but there was definitely some nepotism going on. And then I was on a soccer team where the coach's kid was by far the best athlete on the team. Like, no one complained about him getting the most playing time, which he by far did get the most playing time, but he was our best player, and it was understandable that in a competitive league that you would want to have your best player out there for a little bit longer. And so, the rest of us are like, well, we're fine taking the bench a little bit here and there because we know having him out there is important. So, those are the two different ways to look at it. One was nepotistic, one was not. And in both cases, yes, the parent was the coach. But we do see this in our society, this idea of what's called nepotism. By the way, this is illegal with the United States government. If you're going to give a job to a family member, you have to prove that family member deserves it, has a background to deserve it. So, anyways, now aside from that, just again, stay on this tangent of nepotism in our society. It is allowed as far as like private businesses go. If you built up, say, your restaurant and you want to hand it off to your son, even though maybe you had a worker that was, say, more into the business than your son was, well, that's your right to do so. That's nepotistic, but that's nepotism. That's allowed. I shouldn't say allowed. That people feel like they have the right to because we're a country that believes in freedom. Although, yes, freedom doesn't necessarily mean fair. So, getting off of that a little bit there, I hope that explains the term nepotism for you a little bit. Getting back to China, the entire reason to have tests, the reason why they started it and why we still do it today, is to get rid of nepotism. If that person wants to be a lawyer, then they better take a test to do so. If that person wants to become a doctor, they better take a test to show they're competent. I'm going on tangents again, but if you ever read stories about the Wild West, there's so many people that made actually the richest, one of the three richest guys in California when California started up, especially during the gold rush, 1850 or late 1840s, 1850s. One of the richest guys in California was a doctor who wasn't a doctor. He just said he was, and anyways, I won't go down the road, but he just said he was. He had no training at all, and people trusted him. So that's the type of things we do not want to see in our society. We want to know that our professionals are trained professionals, that they essentially have passed at least some sort of test to say, yes, I'm competent enough. Now, that's what happens in China. They want to have their governors, their leaders, their generals to be, their bureaucrats, basically government workers, to be competent enough. And that's the whole reason why it comes up with it. And it stuck. As much as it sucks, it stuck. Because it did work in the end. Overall, it was a worthwhile system to have. Now, if you're with me, and I talk about this a lot in AP World History and in Modern World History, this becomes very corrupted in China over time. The system does. But anyways, I won't go down that road right now. I'm already noticing the lesson going a little bit further, but I just want to have this be one lesson instead of breaking it down to two. So moving on. Hopefully you're getting the idea. Exam system, huge thing in the course of history. It's the reason why you guys take tests. So, now we're going to talk about probably the great sage emperor of the Han Dynasty. I can't remember how many emperors down this guy Han Wudi is. Emperor Han Wudi is from Liu Bang. But if you've ever seen the movie Mulan, again, I keep referencing that. Again, the cartoon one. This is the emperor in Mulan is patterned after this guy, Han Wudi, the great sage emperor. He knows all. He knows the best thing to do. He knows how to fix a situation, that type of thing. He's very wise. The funny thing about Han Wudi, though, is he did centralize the government quite a bit, something that, from an American point of view, we're like, okay. But the thing is, he was a great leader. He did a great job. And he did realize that there was a lot of nobles out there, potentially other powerful people that didn't really have China's best interests at heart, and he curtailed them pretty good. I shouldn't say all of them didn't. A few of them did, but he ended up punishing all of them. If that's fair or not, different discussion. So, also something to know about ancient China with number 2 there when it says taxing merchants. In our society, being a merchant is something that's like, good job, way to go, way to be an entrepreneur, basically. In Chinese society, they're viewed as bloodsuckers. They're worse than slaves. Like on the social class system, merchants are actually at the very bottom. And the reason why is that it's viewed that they're people that make a living off of other people's hard work. Was the idea that they didn't really do much to gain the life that they have. That can be argued, but anyways, that's the way they're viewed in ancient China. And so Han Wudi was like, everybody hates these guys anyways. I'm just going to tax them. No one's going to complain about that. Who cares about what they think, because they're just a minority. We're going to tax the heck out of them. And they got a lot of money anyways. So, but that does help out the government. It's able to pay for the armies and pay for the upkeep of the Great Wall, which is still there, and keeping out invaders. In this case, I keep referencing Mulan because I know everybody's seen it, but the Huns, the real name for them is the Xiongnu. Those are the steppe nomad, the horse lords that keep attacking China over and over again. And Han Wu does a great job, even though there's a lot of attacks during his day, that he does a lot of things both militaristically and diplomatically to keep the Xiongnu on the other side. And he does keep that Great Wall manned. It works well during this time. So, and then another major thing he does is he recognizes the need to have just more educated people to take that exam system to keep his government running well. So he builds a lot of schools, a lot of universities. The picture in the bottom left is a university that, so they claim, was founded during the time period of Han Wudi. So it's been around for like over 2,000 years. So moving on though. In this slide, there's one or two major things I want to talk about. One of them you definitely need to take notes on, and I don't even have it mentioned here that you need to take notes on it. But that the Han Dynasty is considered a contemporary of the Roman Empire. So we haven't even talked about Rome yet. At least for the class this year, we haven't talked about Rome yet. But Rome is this major, ultra-powerful Western civilization, while you have the Han Empire being this major, powerful Eastern civilization. And they really didn't know about each other before this, but at the time of the Han Dynasty, they start really figuring out who each other are. They don't really meet each other much. Like there's records saying that there might have been one or two kind of exchanges where some Romans met some Chinese, but it's like one of those like maybe it happened, maybe it didn't type situation. But this is when the famed Silk Roads start. If you don't know what the Silk Roads are, it's basically just trade routes where people would basically trade, buy, sell, and trade back and forth from the Han Empire, the Han Dynasty, to the Roman Empire. It wasn't the same person. You didn't get the same person walking from, say, the Han Dynasty all the way over to the Roman Empire. It didn't go like that. What would happen is someone like, say, right here would go sell like silk to someone right here, who would then sell the silk to someone right here, who would sell the silk to someone right here, who would sell the silk to someone right here, who would sell to someone the silk over here in, say, Constantinople. So at that time, the silk has changed hands maybe 10, 20, 30 times. If you don't know how the economics works, every time you sell something, you sell it for more than you bought it for. That's how you make money. And so the Romans are buying silk for an extraordinarily high price. And it was such a desired commodity. We talk about drugs ruining people's lives today, which they do. The desire for drugs, get that next hit, you'll sell your mom to do so. And that is mostly a figure of speech, but there's stuff that's happened that's pretty much that bad. Anyways, it happened in Rome, where people just wanted silk so badly that they essentially sold away their birthrights and things like that. Sold away all their estates just to get this clothing that was so amazing. So quite an addictive thing. But that's how it worked. Now there was stuff that the Romans sold back to the Chinese as well, glassware and stuff like that. But that's the beginning of the Silk Road. So again, the two things you need to know here is that the term contemporary means that they are at the same time. So the Han Dynasty and the Roman Empire are about the same time. The Roman Empire actually lasts a lot longer than the Han Empire does, but these are the two major contemporaries. And then the second thing you need to know is that this is when the Silk Road trade routes start up and stay going all the way until basically the 14 and 1500s. Once sailing trade takes it over and makes walking trade not very viable any longer. Now, this was... I know I'm going a little bit long in this video. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to keep it just one last video. Maybe I should have broken this up. But this is a story I like to tell, and I'll try to keep this short at least. You can write down here what you want to, but I'll just tell you right now, most of the stuff I have on this slide is the stuff you don't necessarily need to have in detail for, say, the test coming up. I just put it on there because I find the story incredibly interesting. If we want to get down to it, kind of the nitty-gritty of the Han Dynasty is just separated into two sections, like the first part of the Han Dynasty and the second part of the Han Dynasty. Because in the middle, you get a short-lived, what is really called like the Jin Dynasty, I might be getting that wrong. Whether you can call it a dynasty or not, we're not sure, but because only one guy was in charge at the time. Basically what happens is, after about 200 years of the Han family being in charge of China, yes, like what happens all the time, that dynastic cycle come into play, and they're becoming corrupt and lazy and blah, blah, blah. And it seems like China's going to heck in a handbasket in the moment. And so you get this guy named Wang Mang, who basically but who the people then look to and say, you know what, you're this amazing scholar. You have passed all the tests. You're this great Confucian philosopher. Why don't you just take charge? You would be such a better emperor than the Han family is. And so he does. And it was a somewhat pretty much peaceful transition of power where he just becomes the emperor and the Han family just is like grumbles and goes away a little bit. It usually doesn't happen like that, but it's like the people seem to want this overall. At least the people in positions of power wanted this. So he becomes emperor, and he is quite a Confucian. He also is very idealistic. He has gone down in history as what's called the socialist emperor. Of course, that's a term we give them because we don't even have the term socialism until the 1800s. But if you don't know what socialism is, it's this idea that, well, the government knows what's best to make everybody happy, so basically the government will control the means of production and property. I mean, the government will say who gets what, when type thing. So, and he was very much like this. He thought, you know what? We would be much better off if everybody had things equally. So he does this, what's called this redistribution of land on what was supposed to be an equal basis, saying, okay, if you have a family this large, you should have this much land to farm and things like that, because that's the main idea, food production still. Always has been. So he does that. That ticks people off, because all of a sudden you have people that have been on land forever. Meaning that, like, hey, my family was here since the Jia Dynasty, and you're taking it away and giving it this family that just moved into town like 3 years ago? No. What are you doing? Like that, this ticks off a ton of people. Like, it doesn't just tick off the people that are losing land, it even ticks off people that are getting land because they're not getting enough. Or they're be giving land that would rather have different land instead. It's like, well, if we're getting more land, we want that one, not the one you gave us. Like, just, he gets it from all sides. Just people are pissed off at him. You know, the people that feel like that they've just so much unfairness going around, or people saying it's unfair, and he's like, what are you doing? I'm making it fair. You just listen to me. I'm the ruler. Confucianism. Dang it, know your place. And that term, even in a Confucian society, saying that to people in their face doesn't get them in line very well. Let's put it that way. What's even worse, though, is as everybody's getting ticked off about this redistribution of land thing, the Xiongnu start attacking, and they start getting over the wall, and there's discontent. You know, usually the wall will fail when you have discontent in the lands. Like, he has to bring his armies down to force a redistribution, but they're not on the wall. So the Huns start coming down, or the Xiongnu start coming down and start raiding, and people are getting pissed off about that. And then I referenced this in an earlier lesson, but it's during his reign that the Yellow River floods. Now, most likely this was just one of those things that was going to happen at some point. It's just unfortunate that happened during his reign because of that whole building up of those dams, those dikes, those levees on the side of the rivers, or the Yellow River, that is. But it's said that this flood kills over 300,000 people. And this was it. I told you before, a major flood, disastrous flood in the Yellow River is the main sign that you've lost the mandate of heaven, or maybe never had it in the first place. And this was it. The people are like, we thought this guy was good. He sucks. We're getting rid of him. So all of China unites against this one guy. He has 1,200 faithful followers that stay with him. I think the name is like the 1,200 Companions or something. But they retreat. He gets tracked down. They're caught at the end of at a canyon. They have this kind of epic battle, kind of a last stand type thing, where in the end, all of his 1,200 are killed, and his people he personally is ripped to pieces. The Han family, this corrupt family at this point, is brought back into power and put in place. Now, whether or not they've mended their ways, I hope so. I don't know anything if they became good rulers at this point. But everything goes good again. The Yellow River is just fine now that it had its major flood. Now that the people aren't so pissed off about it, but they have this major army together that can easily go up and just jack the Huns, because they were united against Wang Mang, and now they're united against the Huns. And then they go back and they just put the land back the way it was supposed to be. Yes, a few people get ticked off. Most of the people are like, well, I wanted that land that it was given to in the first place, and it was like, no, it's just going back to the way it was. And pretty much most everyone is just really happy, and China goes very well for the next 100 years. So again, this is one of those stories where the reason I like to tell this is, we like to mock the mandate of heaven. And then you have this story, and it's like, wow, that mandate of heaven, maybe there's something there to that. So anyways, there's the story of Wang Mang and his short-lived dynasty and his unfortunate end. So now here's the last thing we're going to talk about. If you've noticed, I've hit this type of thing with a lot of these early civilizations we've talked about. The only one I didn't do it as much is with India, although there are some things they do. Like, I think the one thing I brought up with them is the whole idea they're the first people ever to come up with a sewer system. But the Chinese, this is a civilization, going back to that very first lesson, there's this grandiose civilization that is just amazing. And they've done a lot to contribute to the world in many ways. A heck of a lot of stuff. Well, here's some of the early things. If you're not getting the idea of what you're seeing here, two of these things, like the bottom right and the top left pictures, have to do with just medical stuff, that they were all about health. They're the ones that came up with the idea of a pill type of drug, those type of things to take, to ingest, to essentially relieve pain relievers basically. And then they would experiment with things like acupuncture. I've never done that myself, never had a desire to. But this is becoming a very popular thing, even in the United States, or a lot of people swear by it. I've talked to a couple people who are like, no, that was not a good experience. But anyways, if you can't tell what's on the top right, though, that's a fishing reel. Simple things like the horse saddle, or the stirrups for the horse saddle, I should say, or a fishing reel, things we just think are just normal things in life. The Chinese are the ones to come up with this stuff. We talked about the Sumerians coming up with, say, the wagon wheel. Well, the Chinese were the ones that utilized it first ever as a wheelbarrow, where one person could then cart a lot of things a lot easier without having to have some sort of animal labor to pull the cart for you. So here is just the list of stuff. And once you get this down, we are pretty much done. I'm not going to talk much about these. I apologize, mainly because of time. I'm just going to point a few of them out. Some of the biggest things there that you see that are huge for the development of the world as well. Gunpowder is probably the biggest. Paper is one of the biggest. And then this idea of silk. These are some really big things. On the medicine side, drugs basically. Pain relievers has been a huge thing for society, the development of medicine, even in modern times. So, again, I need to end this now. This has gone twice, almost 3 times longer than I should have made this one lesson. I just hope to just kind of get one lesson and we can be finished with China. And we're there. Maybe I should have put this into 2. I apologize. But I will see you guys in the next unit.